Welcome to the Owning Your Sexual Self podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Main, awesome wife and dog mom for life. I'm a sex therapist turned sex coach, and I run a successful business selling relationship enhancement products. I absolutely love talking about all things sex. So you can expect this podcast to explore all things related to women's sexual health because that's what I'm here for. I'm here to help you discover and embrace what brings you pleasure so that you can own your sexual self. If that sounds good to you, then keep listening and let's fucking do this. Hey y'all, I'm just curious. Have you ever wondered what the best nutrition is for getting the best pleasure and sexual health? Right? Oh my gosh, that's what today's episode is all about. I have on with me today a guest, Christine DeLozier, and she is an acupuncturist and herbalist in private practice. However, she specializes in sexual health with treating males and females in all orientations and identities. If you don't already know this, you're about to learn within this episode that acupuncture is great for sexual function, but also to address the underlying mechanics of consistently great sex. The key is diet. So for this reason, she works with patients to develop dietary habits that support their sexual goals. She has studied at the University of Rochester. She has a background in biology and psychology, and she's a young single mom. She has worked as a waitress and studied full-time. She was trained to be a research scientist, but ultimately decided against a career in research. The experience, though, gave her an appreciation for the scientific method, which is employed throughout her book. She has exhaustively reviewed epidemiology and clinical research on nutrition and sexual function to shape the advice presented in this episode today. So she holds a master's degree in acupuncture, traditional Chinese medicine, and counseling. This conversation today has covered so many different topics about what Christine has learned along this journey that she's been on now for several years. So early on in her practice, and she talks about this in the episode, but early on, she treated numerous men for erectile issues with acupuncture who ended up having significant improvements in their sexual satisfaction. And so after seeing how meaningful this improvement was in their lives, she specialized in sexual health and expanded her practice to all that sought that service. She wanted to do more to help them connect with their partners and bring joy to their relationships. So since then, she has treated adults who are looking to have great sex. How awesome is that? All right, let's jump into this acupuncture and nutrition conversation for better sex. All right, so welcome back to the Owning Your Sexual Self podcast. I am very excited for today's guest. I have on with me today Christine DeLozier, and we're going to be talking all about how acupuncture and nutrition can help with your sex life. Like, I'm literally mind blown to have you on here today because who would have thought that these two things could help improve somebody's sex life? And I read in your bio, you've worked a lot with men experiencing erectile dysfunction, with all genders, really. And so I'm excited to hear from you today. Again, thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely. So tell us, how does one get into this line of work?
So it's been kind of a long road getting involved in this. Years and years ago, I trained to be a research scientist. So I developed an appreciation for the scientific method. I read lots of research and understood the process behind conducting scientific research, which ultimately led to this book. But I had a few steps along the way. So I was a counselor for 10 years. Then I decided to go back to school and pursue my passion of alternative and natural health. And so I got a second master's in acupuncture and Chinese herbal medicine. And I went into private practice. So most acupuncturists, we specialize in pain conditions because that's typically what insurance companies will pay for. Mm-hmm. We treat neck pain, we treat back pain, headaches, that sort of thing, among other things. We do fertility, we do a lot of things. But then after that, a lot of us will specialize in one particular thing. So I had a patient who came in years ago and just asked if there was anything I could do to help him have stronger erections. He was having some difficulty with his, sexual relationship with his wife as a result of, age-related kind of decline. And so I said, sure, let's give it a go. It's not something that I treat all the time, but we'll try it out. And one of the points that's typically used to treat sexual function is a point on the perineum, which is in between the vagina and anus, or the testicles and anus. And so it's a major crossing point of nerves associated with sexual function. And we use that. We use some other points as well just to treat his constitution. And he got great results. He was so happy about it. And through the course of our treatment, it really made such a difference to his relationship with his wife. And, it really helped them to experience more intimacy. And after that, I had a few other patients that got really great results. So after seeing how wonderful the treatments were helping these patients, I decided to specialize in it, because I thought, wow, this is something that really has the capability to really help improve the quality of people's lives.
Yeah.
So I did, but my passion has always lied in, diet and nutrition. Mm-hmm. And so with my background in research, I decided to take a look at some of the scientific literature out there to see how the guys that I was treating, some females as well, but mostly male sexual function is what I have treated the vast majority of my patients. And so I wanted to see, okay, what does the science say about how they can support their treatment goals through diet? And so I looked. I wasn't sure what I was going to find, honestly. I wasn't sure how much science there was behind this, because it's not something that we typically think of. We think of diet and what we eat as something that affects our weight, might affect our energy. It's not something that we think about in terms of great sex. Mm-hmm. When we think of great sex, we think of it as a psychological phenomenon. We have the right person, we've got the right mood, we have the right situation. But physiologically, great sex is when our nerves are firing strong, rapid impulses to and from our genitals. Mm-hmm. It's when our blood vessels are delivering adequate blood flow. And of course, this is really important, not just for male sexual function. It's also important for female sexual function, because pleasure, climax, arousal, lubrication, they're all dependent on blood flow. And we know from research that those who have poorer blood flow have less sexual satisfaction, is in terms of, male and female satisfaction. And then thirdly, the third part of this, trifecta of great sex is sex hormones. So when we have optimal testosterone and estrogen, among many other hormones, we have better libido, we have better sex in general. And food, very much, there's tons of evidence showing that it very much affects this trifecta of great sex. What we eat can affect how quickly our nerves carry signals to and from our genitals, which directly equates to pleasure. Mm-hmm. What we eat can affect our sex hormones very much, and also our cardiovascular system. We even have evidence that shows how much one meal affects blood flow. And it's pretty amazing that even after 2 hours after eating a particular meal, we can measure that certain meals increase blood flow, they increase the elasticity of our blood vessels, while other foods measurably stiffen blood vessels. And some foods actually will tank your testosterone right after eating them as well. So, there's foods that we can eat in the short term for great sex, and there's foods that we can eat in the long term for great sex.
Wow, that is fascinating. And that just, to me, that goes hand in hand just with humans in general, getting on this healthier path. Oftentimes, like you said, we think of diet and nutrition in terms of our weight and just how we're overall feeling. But I think for a lot of people probably listening today that might have been putting off this healthier diet or healthier lifestyle, now to hear that making these changes can impact your sex life, right? Like, you're listening to this podcast today probably because you want to have a better sex life, or you want to get some more information on how you can make that happen. And I'm over here like, okay, tell me what I need to eat so I can have stronger orgasms. So right. What are those things that you recommend?
Well, in general, if you want to have like a general picture of a good, great sex diet, it's going to be a lot of fresh fruits and vegetables for sure, eliminating a lot of processed foods. That's your general rule. But then there are certain nutrients that, I highlight in the book as being particularly important. So, for example, leaves. One of the absolute best things that you can put in your body for your sexual pleasure are leaves. And the reason for that is because they basically nourish this entire trifecta of great sex. You have one aspect of them is there are phytonutrients in leafy greens that reduce cortisol levels. So cortisol is a stress hormone which will disrupt testosterone. And again, when you disrupt testosterone, male or female, you will get that'll affect your sex drive and it'll affect sexual function. So it helps optimize testosterone. It has a really high antioxidant content, which will both help to repair your blood vessels and promote optimal blood flow. And it'll also promote optimal nerve conduction as well. So it's all around one of the best things that you can eat. And you see this, my overall general philosophy on food is kind of rooted in the fact that we've strayed so far from what Mother Nature intended for us to eat. Now we eat things out of a box. We load them up with salt to keep them, fresh, quote unquote fresh, and, safe from consumption. And we're very far from what we would be eating kind of in the wild, so if we wanted to see, well, what would we eat? What should human beings be eating? That was a question that I kind of posed to myself, and I wanted to find out some answers, in research and looking at other primates and things. And so if you look at other primates, there's tons of debate about what our closest primate cousins would eat or should eat, or how their behaviors correspond to human behavior. And there's a big variation. Some primates, for example, will eat 0% of their diet comes from animal products. Other primates, about 90% of their calories come from animal products, mainly insects, but sometimes mammals and other things. So what should we eat is a big question. But the one thing about primates is that they eat tons of leaves. No matter the primate, they do eat a lot of leaves. They sit there eating leaves and berries, leaves are a huge part of their diet. Even the ones that are eating like the closer to 90% of their calories from animal product, that's not the majority of primates, and the rest of it is mostly leaves. So, and they, because they eat so many leaves, they get many times the amount of certain nutrients in their diet, like magnesium, calcium, zinc, and all these other things. And this affects all aspects of sex. Again, sex, hormones, nerve conduction. It even affects how our environment impacts our sexual function. So to get off on a little bit of a tangent, our environment, we're exposed to many more pollutants, pesticides, things in our air, toxins that we know from research very much will disrupt sex hormones at the very least, and they do have a neurological effect as well. They affect our nerves. If we eat more, for example, of these minerals like calcium, magnesium, zinc, we know from research that our bodies will actually absorb less of these toxic pollutants. So we help protect ourselves from environmental exposure, which affects sex, by also eating leaves. So that's just one thing. That's just leaves,
Yeah, that's... So when you first said that, leaves, I'm like, yeah, and then you mentioned the primates. I'm thinking when I'm at the zoo, primates, I think of monkeys and grills and things like that. They're always eating leaves and berries. You said that. And so for a human or, somebody that's listening, they're wanting to incorporate more leaves into their diet. Is that different? Like, or is this literally something that you would get from the grocery store, or is there supplements, multivitamins and things like that that contain these same components, and would they work as effectively for somebody?
We're talking about, when we talk about leaves, we're talking about spinach, romaine, arugula, green leaf lettuce, mostly your lettuces, kale, that sort of thing. And in Chinese medicine, these green leaves are considered to be bitter in nature.
Mm-hmm.
So if I can get off on another little tangent here,
Sure.
in Chinese medicine, Chinese dietary therapy promotes eating a balance of the 5 flavors, bitter, sweet, sour, salty, and bland. What we do here in the States is we eat all sweet and salty. And then we do eat some sour, but, like fruits and sour, that's where our sour component comes in. We completely neglect bitter, which is all of our leaves. And we, favoring really sweet, really salty foods. So this throws things out of balance, even in terms of, traditional Chinese medicine's view on sex. And what we need to do is kind of reduce, the salty and the sweet, and then bring more of this bitter and sour. So that means basically fruits and vegetables and leaves back into our diets, for some balance.
Okay. And so with somebody that's listening, so they're trying to incorporate more foods, and so I'm hearing then salad. So definitely a salad a day, and then what other sort of things should they be eating? Are you recommending that they are steering away from a more meat-based diet?
Well, just a really fatty diet. We know from research that a really fatty meal, even one meal, will stiffen arteries within a matter of a couple hours after eating it. Over the long haul, you're talking about major stiffening. So I don't say, my personal philosophy after looking at the research is not to avoid meat per se, because meat can bring other things. I don't know what your personal philosophy is. I know people are very, hold on very tightly to our food beliefs, and I get that. But meat can bring, zinc to the table in a very absorbable form. It can bring some other things to the table. So I don't suggest avoiding meat, but I do suggest avoiding lots of it, avoiding lots of meat and lots of fatty foods, because we are eating too much of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the fat, the fat definitely can affect things. And there's more quality fats as well. There's a difference between processed food fats, and when we refine oils and things like that, it's very nutrient dense form of fat that just we overdo it for sure.
Yeah. Okay. And so you've been doing this work for a while now. Do you have any stories that you're able to share about people that you've worked with that have made these changes in their diets, and the sort of reviews that you've been getting from them?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what I serve as my own guinea pig too for everything that I, promote. So in the book, for example, there's a date night sex menu, and what it is it pretty much includes all the foods that have been shown in research to have an immediate effect on either, hormones or blood flow or blood vessels. So I tested it out with my boyfriend. And we're like, okay, so one meal can make a difference. It can make a difference. It was pretty subtle, quite honestly, but it was noticeable. And that's kind of what the research shows as well, is that's kind of what we would expect. In the clinic, when I see patients, there have been a lot of dramatic changes when people are really dedicated. So sometimes people come in and they're just so motivated and so dedicated. They want to get acupuncture. They're also really willing to make changes in their diet. And one patient, for example, he was experiencing difficulty with erections. They just weren't as strong as he had been accustomed to. And he was having some premature ejaculation as well. With acupuncture and with changing his diet, what he started doing, he just changed kind of 2 meals of the day. He kept his dinners the same, but for lunch, during the work week, he started having a big leafy green salad with some broccoli, cauliflower, and his other favorite vegetables, along with a potassium-rich food like squash, yam, or baked potato, and we'll talk about that as well. And then for breakfast, he would have, really antioxidant rich berries and some nuts with that. And he had really dramatic results. He had no PE anymore, no premature ejaculation anymore. It was completely absent. And his erections were, he rarely even had a problem with having an erection on demand. The further along in the progression of, say, heart disease, the more difficult it is to treat erectile dysfunction, for sure. Mm-hmm. The clients that I have the most success with are the people who are just starting to notice decline, because the blood vessels in the penis and the clitoris are among the smallest in the body. So any kind of plaque accumulation shows up first in sexual function. That's one of the first signs of heart disease, for example, is just a decline in either erections or for females, like ability to orgasm and that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. So anyways, but major results. That was one guy. One female that came in, she was having a hard time climaxing. The biggest thing was there was a big issue of kind of inequality in the bedroom, because it would take her boyfriend a very short amount of time to climax, while for her it was a very long process. And we know that for women that's often the case anyways, but in her case it was something that she really wanted to address, and she wanted to just help her body to be more responsive when she was intimate with her partner. She completely changed her diet and tried to incorporate a lot of the recommendations in the book, and she had, it was like night and day. The first of all, just the time it took her to climax, and also just her overall sensitivity, her clitoral sensitivity.
That's incredible. And there's a piece of me that's thinking, if somebody starts incorporating a more healthier diet into their lifestyle, that is overall going to, in general, just make them feel better, even outside of that sexual realm. And so in the work that I've experienced, when people just in general feel better about themselves, they're feeling more confident, that's also going to show an impact when they are then in the bedroom. And so I'm just loving this. Like, I feel like this all goes hand in hand with everything. And I wanted to ask quickly about the acupuncture. So if somebody that is seeking out this as a treatment, how often would they go to see the acupuncturist? Is it a one-time thing, or is it something that has to happen over a few months? What does that look like for someone?
Typically, I treat patients once a week. And for some patients, I just treat them until they get better, and then we stop treatment, and then they would just come back if they needed me for anything. For other patients, it's more ongoing. So a typical patient, say in their 50s or 60s, I'd probably see them for longer term. And, so I have several patients that come and see me every single week, and they have better sexual function while they're seeing me. But if they miss treatments, or let's say they go out of town and miss a few weeks, they notice a sexual decline. For other patients, typically my younger patients. So, for example, one male that I treated in his 30s, he was just noticing some sexual decline, and it was after just a little bit of trauma. It was just some trauma. He and his girlfriend had been getting particularly, adventurous in the bedroom, and just kind of he noticed a little something, and we treated him until he got back to normal, and then sent him on his way. Or just maybe a patient comes in who's in their 30s and just wants to have stronger erections. We might treat them in the short term. Definitely support our goals with some dietary changes. Mm-hmm. Because the thing about acupuncture is acupuncture helps rebalance things, and life kind of throws them out of balance. Mm-hmm. Our stress, our lack of exercise, the way we eat, all of those things kind of slows the chi and creates blockages, and acupuncture helps promote the movement of chi. So if that makes sense. So the more we can support what acupuncture does in our lifestyle, the less we need to to go back. Yeah.
And how would someone even find an acupuncture person to do this type of work? Is it a certain specialty?
It would be difficult. I don't think that's we'll put it this way. A lot of acupuncturists would be willing to try, for sure. Okay. But not a lot of them specialize in this. There are a lot of acupuncturists. Pretty much every city has at least an acupuncturist or several that specialize in fertility, for example. Mm-hmm. Not a lot specialize in sexual health. But having said that, we've all been trained. We've all been trained to treat sexual health. So it may take a little bit of playing around with. And not all acupuncturists want to needle people's ball, underneath their balls and, for their vaginas. I mean, it's just,
When you said that in the beginning, you're like, yeah, so we trigger the perineum. I'm like, oh shit, like acupuncture already freaks me out. Just like a needle going to my body.
Yeah.
I've never had it done before, but then I'm thinking like, okay, and so now you're going to stick a needle there? Like,
yeah, actually it's really comfortable though. And for some people it is pleasurable in the sense that, so oftentimes I put a needle there and then I run an electrical current. So I'll hook it up to a couple clips that just, it increases the stimulation of that nerve pathway. Mm-hmm. And so for some people, most of the patients, they feel a radiating sensation toward the tip of their penis. And so it feels nice. It feels pleasant. It's not like uncomfortable or feeling like somebody's, jabbing them or poking them.
Yeah. That makes sense. We know how nerve rich that area is and how just for anybody having pressure there, it can be stimulating. I'm curious, do people ever achieve orgasm during this process?
It has happened. It's not typical, not as much as you would think even. The clinical setting of it isn't an optimal situation, but some do. And, some people try to be respectful of the fact that I'm a professional as well. So it's not what people are kind of going for, during the session.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. And you mentioned several times that you have a book. So tell us about this book. What is the name of it, and what can we find when we pick a copy up?
Sure. It's called Diet for Great Sex, Food for Male and Female Sexual Function, Food for Male and Female Sexual Health. I got the name of my own book wrong.
It's okay.
But what it is, this is my goal with the book, was for it to be smart, funny, and provide a lot of really useful information. And I think I've achieved that. It's very easy to read. It's conversational. It's fun. It's fun to read, but it also is backed by a ton of science. I mean, we're talking about, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of studies to support every single suggestion in the book. Mm-hmm. So it basically talks about, the first part of it is the science of a great sex diet. And so what I talk about is how food supports those three aspects of this, trifecta of great sex. How can we achieve optimal nerve conduction? How can we achieve optimal blood flow? And how can we achieve optimal balance of sex hormones? Then after that, I talk about a few of the environmental factors in our sexual health that very much does affect us sexually. There's tons of research to support it, even though in some ways it is controversial. There's this kind of denial out there that things like pollution, air pollution, is having a major effect on our sex hormones, and things like EMFs, electromagnetic fields. You think about 50 years ago, these like freaks that had tinfoil on their head because they were trying to, like these schizophrenics who were trying to ward off all of the, electromagnetic fields. But I looked at the research. I wasn't sure if I was going to find any research on it. I was amazed. I found dozens and dozens and dozens of studies showing that electromagnetic fields from our cell phones, in the amount of exposure that we have from regular cell phone use, is plenty to disrupt our sex hormones. And it's plenty to cause nerve damage as well.
Yeah. And I had a previous guest on the podcast, my episode on fertility preservation, and she had a similar experience, that the city that she was living in had these pollution things happening basically, and it had affected her eggs that she had to put into preservation. And I mean, it was like hearing her tell her story. It was this, like, you would think it was like a freak accident in a way. But then, as you're saying, when you look at the research on this, it is very common, but it's often something that people just overlook, or they think it's bullshit. So
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So then after that, I take a look at what Chinese medicine has to say about it, traditional Chinese medicine. And, I did kind of indulge a little bit in looking at the history of sex in China, because I thought it was a fun topic. So I kind of started off with looking at that. And there's some really kind of interesting practices in ancient China, like these kind of erotic festivals and stuff where people would be coupled off, and it's kind of interesting. And also the sexual practices of common people versus nobility was pretty interesting. The way that the emperor's physicians would write about sex, sex manuals, sex positions, recommendations for optimal sexual function or for pleasuring our partner. Pretty interesting. And then kind of taking a look at what Chinese dietary therapy would look like in relation to sex. There's a chapter on aphrodisiacs as well. And again, everything in the book is supported by research. So I just looked at those aphrodisiacs, mostly culinary aphrodisiacs, that had some research to support their efficacy. And again, most of it is subtle. It's not going to be like a Viagra pill or something. It's more like, okay, if we tested out 100 people using cloves, or half of them were using cloves and half weren't, we had a noticeable improvement in sexual satisfaction among the group that's using cloves. So we know that it works better. It's not to say that it's again going to be this like spiking it with Spanish fly and then just getting the party rocking, sort of thing.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, it sounds very resourceful. Where could we find a copy of this?
On Amazon.
Perfect. My favorite website.
Yeah. All right. I've got everything there. The other thing that's in the book, which is really cool, is I kind of wanted to add this as a bonus because as I was a counselor for 10 years, so much of great sex is in our relationships and in the way we interact with our partner. And in Chinese medicine, psychology and physiology are inseparable. They don't make a distinction between the mental and emotional and the physical. Everything is kind of, considered the same thing. So one thing is I have a chapter just on being a kinder lover. And at the end of the book, I have a chapter on kind of implementing that. Being a kinder lover, includes learning how to pleasure our partner, viewing their pleasure as equal to our own. And so how can we do that? How can we be a better lover? What if we don't know how? And so it just is a whole chapter on sexual tips, mostly for oral sex, oral sex on female or oral sex on male. And, just to try to be more knowledgeable about our partner and to better be able to serve them sexually.
I love that. I mean, yeah, I'll definitely be heading over to Amazon after this to grab myself a copy. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Is there anything final that I didn't ask about or that you were hoping to cover that you think would be helpful for people before we wrap up here?
No, I think we've covered a lot. The other stuff is in the book. There's so much there. It's hard to cover everything nutritionally. I guess one thing that I said that I would talk about, so I will talk about it in conclusion, is potassium. So why would we have our, baked yam or baked potato with our salad every day? Which of course, if you want to make one change, having that one meal would be great. The potassium is really crucial for blood vessels, and we don't get enough of it. So human beings used to take in about 10 times as much potassium as sodium in our diets, and now it's the opposite. We take in about 10 times as much sodium as potassium, and this wreaks havoc on our blood vessels because potassium kind of softens this delicate inner lining of blood vessels, leading to the genitals. And when we don't get enough of it, it just causes dysfunction in blood flow. So getting enough potassium is not an easy task. Surprisingly, there's only a pretty short list of foods that have a good supply of it. And by good, I mean like 20% of your RDA for a cup of it. One of those things, yams, potato, and squash are probably the three best, along with bananas, mango, and oranges. And when you eat the potato or yam, you eat it with the skin on because about 40% of the minerals are in the skin. So there you go. Another really good addition, simple change that you could make in your diet for better sex.
Would a banana a day be as sufficient or no?
It would be, better yet, do both. That would be great, because you eat a banana, you're getting about 20% out of your daily potassium. Then you eat, for lunch, you eat a yam, and you're getting another 20%. And then the small amount of potassium that's in other foods can kind of add up to make up for the rest.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Wow. Yeah, I have learned so much. Again, thank you so much for coming on. If somebody was wanting to reach out to you for any follow-up questions, or perhaps have you as a podcast guest for themselves, how do you prefer that people find you or get in contact with you?
I can be reached at ChristineDeLozier.com. That's my website for the book. And then my website, where I have I think a better contact form, is needleandherb.com. Needleandherb.com. That's my acupuncture website.
Perfect. Yeah, well, you can link both of those in the show notes. And on social media, do you prefer Facebook, Instagram, some other platform?
I have Diet for Great Sex on Instagram, Facebook.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you again, Christine. This has been, again, so resourceful, so helpful, and I'm excited to grab my copy of the book and start making some diet changes to have a better sex life. Like I said, who wouldn't want that for themselves?
Right. Great. Yeah, that's awesome.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. If you loved it, be sure to subscribe so you never miss a thing. And if you loved it so fucking much, be sure to leave a 5-star review. I'll see you next week, and until then, keep owning your sexual self.